in the State Department of Sports, Engineer Peter Tum, CBS. Karibu sana. It's good to have you, and thank you really for hosting us here on TV47. And thank you also for your great hospitality. It's good to see you after a very long time. And pole kwa kazi.
Asante, Tony.
I know you're very busy, and of course, you're getting into a very busy period. Remember, of course, Kenya is hosting and is privileged to be hosting the 2024 Africa Nations Championships right here in Kenya. Kenya, of course, will be co-hosting with Tanzania and Uganda. And of course, for sure, preparations are in top gear. Our stadiums, of course, undergoing renovations and constructions. And that's why we are here, of course, to engage the Honorable PS, Bwana Engineer Peter Tum. Asante sana. Just to get into it, the CAF Confederation, the Confederation of African Football Inspectors were here recently to inspect our facilities. What is the status, for example, for Nyayo National Stadium? What is the status? Where are we complete in terms of what they say that needs to be completed, or where are we in terms of how prepared we are for this particular championship?
Thank you very much, Tony Kwalanda.
Karibu.
And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You know, Kenya has been given an opportunity to showcase its prowess or her prowess in hosting some of these very important international games. And for this time round, we were lucky to have been given an opportunity to host CHAN, just like you rightly said, from 1st to 28th of February next year, 2025. You are also aware that we are preparing to host AFCON around July or August 2027. So we are geared towards ensuring that we are prepared for the two international matches, AFCON and CHAN. Now, we had earlier on, like you rightly said, we had earlier on been visited by inspectors, and as a government, we had anticipated to host CHAN in Western. We had the Bukhungu Stadium and we had the Kandui, which we had identified. But when CHAN, the CAF, who are the hosts of, or the rights owners of CHAN and AFCON came and they visited those two stadia, they realized that we wouldn't be ready. The stadia or the infrastructure development there would not be ready for hosting the same in February. So we quickly switched and said, after all, we were preparing Nyayo, we were preparing Kasarani to host AFCON. So we quickly sat down, we talked with them, and we organized and said we were now going to move the hosting of CHAN from Western to the city. And we had already earmarked contractors, and they were on site that were doing renovations for that AFCON. Then the other one was Nyayo, and the requirement was that we finished it to the level, the standard that they required. I want to inform Kenyans that we therefore decided to call them last week just to come and see where we are in terms of that preparation. They came over, they checked the two stadia, and although we were still waiting for the report, we've been given a clean bill of health. What you should also be able to understand is that, like you've rightly said, we are not the only ones hosting. It is an East African Pamoja bid. This is Uganda, Tanzania, and ourselves, Kenya. So each of these countries was required that we prepare at least 2 stadia, and then at least 3 training grounds. So again, we chose a training ground at Ulinzi. We chose a training ground at the police, Sako. We also looked at Kirigiti. And then there is a training ground that is within Kasarani. Those ones are also undergoing refurbishments. So meaning that with the speed with which the contractors are working, the speed with which we are doing the supervision, the funding that we have been able to facilitate from the ministry, we will be ready for the inspectors to come and see what we've been able to do so that we can host Chan.
I looked at the itinerary of the CAF inspection team. They're also looking at the hotels. They're also looking at how movement will be, for example, from the stadium maybe to this particular place. How is that so far? They also made stops at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to see also how prepared that is. And I'm sure maybe there was a report, but it's on the desk in terms of that area.
Oh, yeah. Apart from the infrastructure for the stadium, they are also looking at very many other aspects of readiness as a country. And over and above the airport itself, the hotels, and the rest of them, they were keenly looking at the movement of people from the city to the stadiums. And the first stop, like you rightly said, is that when they arrived at the airport, we gave them an opportunity, working together with the Ministry of Transport, to be able to walk around to see the kind of arrangement that we have. On the spot, they said we are okay at the airport. So working with the migration, we will be putting desks specific for those who are coming for the tournament. And therefore, that kind of preparation, working as one government, as ministries within one government, will be ready by the time we host the tournament. The second one is the movement. Now, we are in the planning stage. And again, like I told you, we are working at intersectoral, using the intersectoral approach. We will be having buses that will be transporting, funds, will be transporting, of course, the players themselves. So the whole of that ecosystem is being worked on so that there will be ease of transport for the common mwananchi, the spectators, the fans, and everybody else, as well as those then officials and the teams that will be in the country. And remember, it is not only Kenya that is hosting, like I said before, and therefore then we have a coordinating mechanism between ourselves and the 3 East African countries. And I happen to be in charge of the PSS of the 3 East African countries in terms of organizing our teams to look at logistics, look at issues to do with branding, look at issues to do with communication, and of course, financing. And therefore, then it is all systems go. We met last week virtually, the 3 ministers and ourselves, and we have kind of created an ecosystem where then we will be able to ensure that we are all ready at that particular time. When you look at the hotel industry, they also visited. We have several 5-star hotels, and they were even spoiled for choice. They went to Hyatt, they went to the Marriott, they went to Kempinski, they went to all these 5-star hotels, and they were like, yeah, I think this is the place where we need to be. And of course, we have the 4-star, we have the 3-star, as you wish. And therefore, having chosen Nairobi, we thought also that was very good because on hospitality, we are number 1 in this region. On issues transport and communication, we are doing quite well. In terms of money transfers and that kind of thing, we are quite okay. So I think for me, having looked at when we did the meeting that we were now debriefing each other, they went back a very satisfied team.
Indeed. And of course, as well, Bana PS, Kenya is set, of course, to reap very big from this hosting of the African Nations Championship. And this looks like sort of a warm-up, a trial for the 2027. What benefits do you think Kenya will have in depth hosting the African Nations Championship looking towards 2027?
Sometimes we like calling it a dry run. A dry run because it is a precursor to the AFCON 2027. But looking at the benefits as a country, I think when I speak about tourism, when I speak about the economic turnaround that we'll be able to have for during the hosting of both CHAN and AFCON is monumental. And the reason even that we won some of these competitions is because when they looked at us in terms of where we are and the level at which then we'll be required to prepare for the same, we were somewhere else. Remember, Kasarani was built in 1987 to host the All Africa Games. Nyayo the same. And therefore, even doing the refurbishment itself was something that wasn't going to be quite difficult for us, because already that infrastructure itself, the way it was, is something that is monumental. So when you look at it from the point of view of the benefit to the common mwananchi, for instance, and you see the population that will be able to be in this country. Of course, we are still doing the logistics, agreeing who will host what. But at the end of the day, the 19 teams will divide themselves into the 3 East African countries, meaning that the tourism aspect of it and the sales that will be here, and probably for me, the hustlers that will be, doing sales in the city and that kind of thing, it will be like a day for them to reap. And therefore, on the economic side, I'm very sure that we will gain as a country. Politically, we will gain as a country, because then we are showcasing ourselves to the world as a powerhouse that can be able to host football to that kind of level. And then 2 or 3, when you look at the hosting of everybody else, the hotels will reap big. And therefore, economically, I think it's going to benefit the country.
Indeed. And of course, we will be having a sort of a conglomeration, or Kenya will be a boiling pot of a lot of talent. We have these 19 countries which are coming, and these are some of the top African nations that we have in football. We have also our local leagues. There's a lot that will be exchanged in terms on and off the pitch. Of course, we've spoken a lot of off the pitch, but on the pitch itself, local teams will get an opportunity, of course, to interact with this. How will that, and of course, as you speak also about the local organizing committee, of course, I know the other East African nations have already done that. You being the head of the East African joint bid, this particular hosting nation, how is that going to look like? And of course, about the local organizing committee.
Yeah, talking of the experience Kenyans will have in terms of talent, creation and exposure to our footballers, it is going to be on another level, like you rightly said. And what we know as Kenya is that Kenya is a sleeping giant insofar as football is concerned. And that is why, as government, we decided and said you must host these 2 international football tournaments for 2 reasons. First and foremost, for that to allow us also prepare our teams. And when you look at the ecosystem in terms of the preparations that we've undertaken in the recent past, it is on another level, meaning that the excitement on the side of the footballers themselves, because of what we have done as government, is very high. But 2 is that we are going to expose the same group of people to an international match, and therefore they can be able to weigh themselves where they are. And then even for the spectators themselves, the fan experience and that kind of thing is on another level. The secretariat is already existing. It is the one that is communicating with the other 2 East African countries, and they are the ones who are providing logistical support for planning. That is a team. The secretariat is the one that meets the AFCON, the CAF inspectors whenever they come, and they are the ones now, of course, who undertake to ensure that what has been said is done.
Indeed. And of course, PS as well, I know of course, this government is high on giving an opportunity to the hustlers.
Correct.
Those, of course, who can actually do business. Are you looking at curating something, for example, during this African Nations Championship that can give an opportunity to the Mama Mboga or to the Boda Boda person during that event? For example, of course, for the hustler bazaars that you've always been putting in these kind of events? Looking at something like that in our football tournament in February?
Tony, when you see what we've been doing, whenever we hold sporting activities like Safari Rally, like golf, the MKO, what you've realized is very constant with the hosting of these international sporting activities is the hustler bazaar thing. You might call it something else. It could be hustler vendor system. It could be a hustler bazaar system. It could be anything. But at the end of the day, that is very, very critical. Because what we are saying as government is that let people compete, right? Let us also, on the other side, grow talent. Let us monetize that talent. But at the end of the day, there is a common mwananchi also who is part and parcel of the support system. How do they gain? They gain by ensuring that they hawk their merchandise in an organized environment. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that as we now have the tournaments running, we also have these people do some economic activities in a controlled environment that then allows them to work and also enjoy what is happening. So that has been organized specifically for our country. That secretariat that I'm talking to you about is the one that has organized to ensure that the hustlers around Nairobi and elsewhere benefit financially from the influx of human beings that will be coming either as spectators or participating in the sporting activity, football.
In case Plan A doesn't work, how does Plan B look like? And since now that you are the head of the three nations, how does Kenya compare to Tanzania and Uganda?
The only places where we have Plan B is insofar as issues to do with the training grounds are concerned. Because we also want to have a spread, and that is why they only require 3, but we have 4. That is a Plan B, right? But because we have had Kasarani and Nyayo identified, and of course, Kirigiti as a training ground, Ulinzi as a training ground, and the ones that I spoke about. We don't need to come up with Plan B. The Plan Bs that we've been doing is to ensure that we walk the steps, each step with the inspectors, so that we have a control mechanism in our development of that infrastructure that ensures that in case we want to veer off that we've been told to do, they come in very quickly and we check. And that is why we've given ourselves a time lag of 1 month between the time we are completing the infrastructure and that time that we are hosting the CHAN, so that it gives us leg room to be able to reorganize whatever has not been organized. And the mere fact that they have come twice and they have given us a clean bill of health, and of course, they have also told us what to do in specific areas, like on the areas of grass and that kind of thing. We are working together to ensure that once the product is out, we don't have to have had a Plan B, for instance. Because we are focused, we've had our financials right, and we know what the output is.
And PS, of course, are some of the partners.
You talked about the other 2 East African countries.
Yes, please.
And on a comparative analysis, I think we are working together.
Okay.
Because we've opened communication lines. They are also having challenges on finances and everything else, but we will be ready at that particular moment together, right? Because if you look at Kasarani, for example, we are around 90% complete. And the 10% that is remaining, I think 17% that is remaining, or 13 thereabouts by as of today, is just something that had to be waited for. The lights,
the sound system,
and that kind, and the sound system. You look at Nyayo. What we are saying in Nyayo is that we are not going to complete the canopy in Nyayo for purposes of CHAN. We will not. We just want to make it ready for the hosting of CHAN by putting the lights, by putting the changing rooms and everything. And all those are almost complete. So that in phase 2, we can now prepare for the AFCON, and we have a time period, and we'll then put the canopy and everything else, right? But for purposes of CHAN, we will be ready at that particular moment. And comparatively, we are okay with the East African countries.
Of course, our audience, part of our viewers, of course, will want to really to listen to that. And also, they're keen to know some of the either agencies or companies, private, public, or who are part and parcel of this. Of course, I know recently you yourself and the CS launched, actually met the partners of the WRC. But also, I'm also looking at the African Nations Championships. Who maybe are you looking to work with, or who are you already working with in terms of this event? So at least now people will know who you and Adil Nachan.
You know, when we were working with Safari Rally, that brand has already been developed to a level that then the private sector, the corporates, have realized that it is a competition that is well curated, yes, and therefore have come in big numbers. And that is why we met them, specifically for them to understand where we were in terms of the preparations. Remember, we are hosting it also in March. But on issues of AFCON, on issues of CHAN, there are two things that we are looking at in government. We are saying, once we have done this infrastructure development to that level, what kind of sustainability programs are we going to have? And the thinking, and we have talked to a few partners, is that we should be able to do some PPP framework. Either they brand, and they market, that is one way, so that we divest from the management and the running of this infrastructure that we've already been able to set out. When you look at Talanta, for instance, it is a 60,000-seater stadium. This one in Kasarani is around 55 or thereabouts. The Nyayo one is around 20. When you look at that capacity, and you see the kind of entertainment and functions that will be required to be hosted in these places, we want as government to have, and we are working on our policy, by the way. Mm-hmm. You remember the other day we launched a policy team that is going to look into a framework. Because of this thinking that we are having, we need to have a policy framework. So what we are saying is that going forward, we must have a management sort of system that then ensures that this study remain at the levels that we have prepared them for even international use in future. And therefore, we are still at the identification process of the same. And at the same time, we are also working on the policy, so that once we have identified these partnerships going forward, we will be working under a certain framework that has been thought through. And that is why we've told this team that by March next year, they should be able to give us a draft of the policy framework that we need to undertake generally on issues sports.
Indeed. Of course, my last question, Bwana PS, about now that you're into this infrastructure development in the country, especially in the facilities, how will this be replicated maybe besides Nairobi? How will it be? I'm sure you're looking also, this will be, as you're saying, the framework, the policy, the committee will stipulate that. But are we looking at other counties really enjoying the benefits that Nairobi is enjoying in terms of sports infrastructure?
Of course. You might have realized that AFCON is going to be hosted here in Nairobi and Eldoret. But let me go back and probably give you what we are doing as a government in terms of sports. One is that the ministry has a responsibility of identifying talent. The ministry has a responsibility of nurturing that talent. and then ultimately do what we call monetizing. You cannot be able to identify talent when you don't have the right infrastructure. So from the policy point of view, we've decided, and as a ministry, and said we are going to develop community academies at each and every county. And that is why the other day you realize that we have advertised to develop 35 academies in the country to begin with. So that ultimately we'll be having an academy in each and every constituency in this country. So basically what we are saying is that those academies are responsible for identifying and nurturing talent. And how shall we do that? We'll have to work together with the schools, because those academies that we are going to construct will be constructed near schools or in the schools. And because we have a department here that deals with talent creation, we have instructed them to begin training coaches from the schools, identifying coaches, and working together with the schools as a policy, so that by the time these sports academies are now up and running, we will be having teachers that have been trained on how to identify talent. And then we are leveraging also on technology. The other day we built up a technology center in Kasarani under the Kenya Academy of Sports, whose purpose is basically just to see what is happening around in the counties. So we have a forecast system of identifying these talents in football, in volleyball, in hockey, and that kind of thing, and working together with the schools. And therefore, the reason we are saying counties must have this infrastructure, right? So we have a deliberate, move to ensure that come another 5 years, we have all the constituencies having academies.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Bwana PS, Principal Secretary for the State Department of Sports, Engineer Peter Tum. As rightly heard, of course, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda will definitely be ready to host the African Nations Championships by the end of this month, of course, having January just as a month to look and test and try and see which areas I just need polishing. So will you be ready to enjoy football? Will you be ready to actually do business during this football? Will you be ready to welcome the more than 19 countries, 19 football teams, 19 support staff, 19 plus thousands of tourists will be in these 3 East African nations? Will you be ready? Of course, as TV47, we shall be ready. Thank you very much indeed, Bwana PS, for hosting us here again, and of course for actually sharing where we are as a government. From us here, we thank you, and of course, God bless and take care.
Thank you.
Asante.
Asante sana.
Yes, indeed, that was that one-on-one exclusive interview with the Principal Secretary of Sports, Engineer Peter Tum, shedding light on where we are as Kenya, one of the countries that will be hosting the 2024 African Nations Championships in February next year. Remember, the Confederation of African Football Inspectors are in town. They have camped in town for the last 2 or so weeks to offer guidance and consultancy in matters preparedness for this particular event. And just as you've rightfully heard from Engineer Peter Tum, the PS for Sports, indeed, we are ready. Remember, Kenya, as just the way Engineer Peter Tum has mentioned, he is the leader, the PS, the leader in that PS group of the East African nations, Tanzania and Uganda. And you can imagine, of course, we have all the bragging rights that indeed we shall be hosting this event here. You need to be excited about this event, because this event will bring a lot of positives to you and I. That one I know for sure. I've been in the sport for the last, say, 17 years. I know how important these events are. Also, of course, also on this particular show, I'll be showing you the other countries that have successfully been announced as hosting the World Cups. So you can imagine Kenya is doing a warm-up for the Africa Cup of Nations. You just never know. It might not be in our lifetime, but Kenya one day will host the FIFA World Cup, or whichever World Cup of any status, because you're already even hosting the World Cup in Raleigh. That is the WRC. Imagine, tuko na hiyo already hapa hivyo. So remember, that is very important. If in case you want to have that particular interview in full, be sure to find it on our social media platforms. On Facebook, that is TV47 Kenya. You can also find it on X. That interview, you can also find it on TV47 Digital. In case you miss it on YouTube, you can be for sure utaipata pale interview ambayo nilikuwa nafanya na katibu ama PS wa sports, engineer Peter Tum. Thank you indeed.